What's up, everybody? So glad you're here. We are in a series called Challenge Accepted. And here's kind of the principle, the premise that we're operating under. If you want your faith to grow, I'm hoping and assuming there's a lot of you out there that do, you cannot stay where you are. Now, let me ask you a question. Do you ever struggle to find something like totally worth watching on Netflix, and so you just sort of settle on something after stumbling for hours on shows, and like by the time you watch something, it's likely shorter than the time that it took to find that show? Have you been there before? Well, I stumbled onto this show one time. It's a documentary, and it was actually very interesting. It's called Losing Sight of Shore. Now, it was fascinating because it's these four ladies that set out to row a boat from California to Australia. For you geography light people, that's 8,446 miles across the water. Okay, just for context, to give you an idea, that would be like crossing from the West Coast to the East Coast, and then back from the East Coast to the West Coast, and then the West Coast to the East Coast. That's 3 times across the United States. This is what they endured. Like, it was 24 hours a day, 7 days a week in a small little vessel, barely enough for the 4 of them. And they would take turns rowing for a few hours and then switch rowers. They'd take a break and then get back to rowing again. And they do that round the clock over and over again, night in, night out, rowing at about 2 to 3 miles per hour, which is slow. And all of this, the length of time that it took them was 9 months of doing the same thing every day. They gave up like all the normal features of life for one goal: to cross the Pacific for charity. They endured crazy storms, intense humidity, and direct sunlight. They had like all these unpredictable waves that would come and cold fronts. There was just constant movement. Now, I won't tell you what happens as to not spoil a very cool story, but holy cow, like these ladies are pretty awesome. And there's one word, as I was watching and thinking back on that film that comes to mind. Well, crazy kind of comes to mind, but beyond that, one word comes to mind for what these ladies endured. It's this. It's the word sacrifice. Sacrifice. They had to sacrifice to achieve this dream. You know, if they wanted to cross the Pacific in a rowboat, they were going to have to sacrifice in order to get there. They'd have to sacrifice time, energy, money. They'd have to sacrifice their safety and comfort and just the regular aspects of life. I want you to listen to this. Following Jesus requires sacrifice. You know, sometimes I think we have sort of a make-believe version of following Jesus, and growing in our faith doesn't necessarily involve the word sacrifice for us. That's the way it is for me sometimes. But if you open the pages of the Bible and you read about those who follow Jesus, they experience a very different kind of faith than many of us do and see today. Following Jesus meant that you have to leave where you were and abandon what you had and go wherever Jesus wanted you to go. It was totally radical. Just how radical was it to follow Jesus? I want you to take a look at the apostles. Just consider the apostles, those who were following Jesus from the inception. Do you know how the apostles died? Well, I'll tell you. Let's take a look at a few of them. First, let's look at Peter and Paul, both martyred in Rome at about 66 AD during the persecution under this evil man named Nero. Paul was beheaded, and Peter was crucified upside down at his request because he didn't feel it was worthy to die in the same manner as his Lord. And that's legit. That guy's the guy. Well, then you have Andrew. Andrew said he preached in Asia Minor, which is like the modern day area of Turkey, and in Greece, where he is said to have been crucified as well. And then you have Thomas. Thomas, they claim that he died in India, where he was pierced through 4 spears from soldiers, which is sweet, yeah. Then you have Philip. Philip converted the wife of this Roman proconsul, and in retaliation, which wasn't a good thing evidently, because in retaliation, he was arrested and cruelly put to death. Then you have Matthew, the tax collector and the writer of one of the Gospels, and he was stabbed to death in Ethiopia, followed by Bartholomew, probably martyred in Arabia. Then you have James. James, the Jewish historian Josephus says that he was stoned and then clubbed to death. That's rocks, not weed. Then you have Simon the Zealot. Allegedly, he was ministering in the Persian area, and then he was killed after refusing to sacrifice to the sun god. Then you have Matthias, and he was the chosen apostle to replace Judas, if you remember that. Tradition says about him that he was in Syria somewhere, and then with Andrew, and they were both put to death by burning. Well, then it comes to John. John is the only one out of all of the company of those great men to have died a natural death. But that was after several times they tried to kill him. Welcome to Christianity. Isn't that cool? I'm sure when they signed up to follow Jesus, they didn't necessarily know that that was in store for them. But isn't it interesting that the way we like to view the faith today is that it will only make our lives more enjoyable. You know, many of those that follow Jesus lost their lives, and we want Jesus to bring us comfort. They gave everything they owned, and we want Jesus to bless us with more stuff. They were threatened just because they believe, and we want Jesus to always keep us safe. Let us always wear a bike helmet everywhere we go. You know, sometimes I think we think like this: hey, thanks Jesus, but I'll believe in you only if I can stay quiet, I can stay normal, I can stay popular, and I can keep doing the things that I want to do without sacrificing. But if you want to experience a faith and a life that is adventurous, you can't remain where you are. You have to be willing to leave what is comfortable, leave what is familiar, whatever is safe, and move towards Jesus, because he always calls people out from where they are. Jesus put it this way to his disciples one day. And this is found in the book of Luke, chapter 9, verse 23. I want you to follow along with me when I'm reading this. This is from the Message translation of the Bible. It kind of puts it in a very unique way. Jesus said this: then he told them what they could expect for themselves if they're going to follow him. It says, anyone who intends to come with me has to let me lead. You're not in the driver's seat, I am. Don't run from suffering, embrace it. Follow me and I'll show you how. Self-help is no help at all. Self-sacrifice is the way, my way to finding yourself, your true self. Isn't that pretty cool? You know what Jesus is calling us to is not necessarily to literally die, but though it may be, what Jesus is calling us to is to sacrifice every single day. To wake up and ask, what does Jesus want from me? Not what do our friends want necessarily, not what we alone desire, not just our dreams and our goals, but what does Jesus want from me? And he wants us to die to ourselves. How do we die in this sense? Let me give you two, and there are more than just two examples, but let me just give you two examples of ways that I know we struggle with, and by we, I mean definitely me and perhaps you. First one is that we die to control. Just show of hands. You don't have to raise your hand if this is hard to believe about yourself or to admit to other people. Are there any control freaks out there? You always need to know the plan. You always need to play a part in the decision making. You can't allow anything to be a mystery. I just described myself, by the way. But know this, if you let Jesus lead, you won't always know where he's taking you. You won't always know where he wants you to go. And the author of Hebrews says it like this in Hebrews 11, chapter 6. He says, and you can read along with me, and without faith it is impossible to please God. And without faith, it's impossible to please God. You know, one way we die to ourselves is that we die to control. Another way we die to ourselves is when we die to comfort. And this is another tough one. Anyone out there love their comfort? You don't like to be in any uncomfortable situations, even for a minute. You have to sleep in your comfy little bed. Anybody like addicted to sleep? Like you so love your bed and your pillows. You have to be around people that you like. You know, it's a stretch to invite someone to church or to even remotely talk about or discuss faith. Because for you, you're thinking, I don't want to feel uncomfortable. I don't want that rejection. Maybe you aren't even willing to serve at church or go on a missions trip because of how uncomfortable you may be. You may think, I don't know enough, and I'm not sure I'm equipped for that, and I just don't want to be put in those circumstances. But students, listen to this. It can be uncomfortable to serve others, to share your faith with others, to get on a plane like 50 other students from our ministry are doing this summer and heading to Kenya. They're visiting one of the poorest places on the planet. I'm telling you, one smell from like the raw sewage floating down the gutters in between the houses will kick you right in the gag reflexes. I mean, it's bad. Sacrificing and dying to ourselves requires us to die to comfort. Because if our lives from like the moment we wake up to the moment that we go to bed is all about us, we will never grow. If our time is consumed with always playing games, always thinking about sports, like our mind's always wrapped around a person or a screen, then we'll never grow. So I want you to think about this. How much time do you think about you? I know that's messy. Think about this. How much time do you think about you? You know, I bet for all of us, it's a lot. I recently read that people spend somewhere, and I don't even know how they came up with this. They like followed somebody around, like, what are you thinking about now? What are you thinking about now? But they found out what somebody was thinking, and they said that somewhere around 95% of their time was thinking about themselves or like their story. So if they're thinking about someone else, it's only about how it fits into their story. I think that's probably true for most of us. So the challenge this week, should you choose to accept it, is to sacrifice. After all, that is what it means to be a follower of Jesus, to daily sacrifice. So every week of this series, this is to catch everybody up, we've been giving out 3 challenges to choose from. You have your basic, you've got your advanced, and then you have your dangerous challenge. And in order to take 2 of those challenges, you need to do the basic and the advanced. If you want to do more than 2, that means you have to take all 3, the basic, the advanced, and the dangerous one. So here they are. I'm going to lay them out for you, and you'll discuss these in your groups a little bit later. First one is basic, is to serve at CCV. It's to serve at CCV. Now, there'll be a time later on where you can sign up for this. Some of you have been putting this off for a very long time, and this is going to be a good challenge for you. But others of you, I put this in the basic category because, like, truth be told, if you were to go over to our kids ministry on any of our campuses, our kids ministry stay afloat because of our high school ministry. Our junior high ministry stays afloat because of our high school students. And so many of you high school students are already serving. You are awesome. I love that you guys are serving, but for many of you, this is kind of a basic start. Second challenge, here's the advanced one, and it's a screen fast. This is a screen fast. Let me try to explain this for you. This would be like social media, gaming, your phone, something you watch on TV. And you would take the time that you would spend doing that, and instead of that, like you'd stop doing that for a week, and you'd spend time with Jesus. Now, let me ask you, how many of you are addicted to your phone? Probably most of us are addicted to our phones. How many of you are giving me like the dirtiest looks because of this challenge right now? You're like, no, he didn't. No, he didn't. No, I'm not gonna. Okay, the screen fast is a tough one. It's definitely advanced. It's gonna be hard because, listen, I know that a lot of you spend a lot of time on your screens. You know that you've got a lot of time in front of your gaming console. It means that you're gonna give all those things up for the week. 7 days, you'd stop looking at your screen, you'd stop watching shows, and instead you'd replace it with something that's gonna grow you. You'd pick up a book about spiritual leadership. You'd start spending more time in prayer. It doesn't mean that like the entire day is filled like that if that's what you're used to doing, which is 8 hours of screen time. It just means that you'd stop doing screen time and you'd spend more time with Jesus. I want you to think about how this could grow your faith this week, how you could spend just a little bit more time with Jesus by a small fast. Anyone up for that? I hope there's tons. I hope there's tons of you that are up for that one. Well, then the last challenge for this week is your own. This is your own challenge. I want you to think about this and discuss this in a group. This would be that you sign up for a missions trip this next year that you're gonna help fund. You're gonna set a date to talk to somebody that you know and you've been resistant to share your faith with. Like you're gonna go out of your way and you're gonna share your faith with them this year, and you're gonna pick a date to do that. You're gonna sell something in your house, like you're gonna sell your big screen in your bedroom because you got one like this, like hovering above your bed. Don't do that unless your parents are cool with it. But I want you to consider doing something radical that kind of finds itself in this dangerous category so that, man, you can grow in your faith this year and you can come up with your own. And so in your groups a little bit later, if you choose to accept it, you're gonna come up with your own challenge that's going to be awesome. Here's what I want you to think about, and we're gonna put it on the screens. It's kind of gonna be simplified like this. What is Jesus calling you to sacrifice in order to grow? One of the ways I think God gives us the indication that we need to sacrifice something is when we are resistant to living without it. In other words, which challenge of the three that I just mentioned before gives you the most amount of anxiety and stress? You know, that is likely to be the one that you should consider. If you're like shaking your head like, nope, never, not gonna do it, that might be the one that God's calling you to. You know, if your heart rate goes up and you start justifying your need for social time, social media time, or that certain $8 coffee drink that you have to have every single day, or why you can't serve for whatever reason, that's a good indication of what Jesus could be wanting to challenge you with in your life right now. In your group tonight, you're gonna talk through what it means to sacrifice. Not only just what it means to sacrifice once, but what it means to live in such a way that you daily sacrifice. And I want you to think this. I want you to think through this. Could you imagine if CCV students took the calling from Jesus seriously to die to ourselves? If we put the needs of others ahead of our own? If we thought about ourselves a whole bunch less, and we started to put God ahead of everything? Could you imagine the radical things God could do around us? You know, how exciting could it be if we just started to see students and coaches and pastors that took these risks? They were no longer like passively believing in Jesus, but they were putting Jesus at, you know, like when for so many of you, you were back at camp and you're excited about it, and everybody who didn't go to camp, you saw all these people that were excited about it. We came back and we're like, we wanted to do something. That is this series. That's what we've been talking about for several weeks in this Challenge Accepted series, is that we're gonna do something about it. This could be for you one of the most unforgettable times in your life if you allow God to call you out to new places with Him. The real question is, will you accept His challenge? I wanna pray for everybody. Pray with me. Jesus, we know that you're calling us out from where we are, every single one of us, whether we've just started worshiping you and following you, whether we haven't yet, or whether we've been on the journey for a while. Call us out to more. challenge us to more. Help us to grow our faith in such a way that it becomes so visible to others that we have surrendered our lives to you. Love you. Thank you for all of our students. It's in Jesus' name that we pray. Amen.